So, my name is Dennis Miniam, and I think you're probably aware from the title of this session that we're going to be talking about security today. The title it makes the proposition that OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online, just add that mentally. The OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online give you the most secure place to store your data in the cloud. So, Liam Cleary and I are going to attempt to demonstrate this to you with a series of PowerPoint slides, some great animations, because some of the stuff doesn't really demo very well because it's infrastructure stuff. So I expect you to appreciate the value of the animations when they come up. And in appreciation for your appreciation, we've got these great T-shirts.
Yeah. Everyone likes free stuff.
That's right. So here's the deal. We believe that OneDrive is the most secure place for you to store your data in the cloud. We lead the industry in our security features, particularly when it comes to intrusion detection and encryption and all the mechanisms you need to keep intruders out of your system. But we also believe that because of all the effort we put into protecting the environment, I mean, we're probing at the boundaries, kind of like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. We're investing a lot of money in trying to make sure that the environment is secure. So we're actually investing more than any individual company really can. So it's my view, I don't know about you, Liam.
Not yet.
But it's my view that OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online, for most companies, is the safest place to put your data, period. So that's the ingoing proposition. So, Liam, what are we going to talk about?
I think maybe OneDrive. I'm not sure if we can get this to work. Oh, there we go. So, my name's Liam, work for Productivity. You may have seen me speak before or maybe not. And as you can tell, I'm not from Chicago. I'm actually from Virginia. No, genuinely, I live in Virginia. I actually do live in Virginia, but yes, I'm from West Virginia. No. So yes, I'm from the UK. I've been living here for a while, and this is going to be a good session. It's one of those ones where Microsoft releases something great, and I can say this because I'm not Microsoft. Microsoft releases something, and it's always great. You're like, yeah, Microsoft say do this, do this, do this, do this, and then you get on it and go, yeah, that's all right. But you know what? OneDrive's actually pretty good. So we're going to talk about something a bit different. That was the wrong way. We're going to talk about three specific things. We're going to talk about threats from without, threats from within, and then what's coming up in the horizon. Now, we could have wrote you a big list of all the things we're going to talk about, but we just wanted to save the space on the PowerPoint. So let's talk about threats from without. Let's kind of have a look. What do you think, before I go on the slide, what do you think is the biggest threat that we face right now? Users. Is that it? Just you lot? So in fact, you're your own threat. Competitors? Okay. Sorry? Okay. Ransomware? The government, hackers. Yeah. Well, who are you scared of the most? The hackers? Do you actually lose sleep because of hackers trying to steal stuff out of your SharePoint site? That'll be a no then. Still the users. So we're going to kind of focus on some stuff. But actually, one of the biggest threats that we've got if you move to the cloud, because I hear this all the time, is I have my on-premises stuff, it's nice and secure, and then, oh, we need to do an extranet or something else. It moves to the cloud, and then security becomes a problem. Because now you've suddenly got to expose internal stuff outside. It's now going to be hosted by somebody else. So the first people that we kind of worry about are these. We do genuinely worry about the guys wearing the black hats. And it's not just the Breaking Bad guy either. But we do worry about these. So what do we have? We have that external people, these hackers, these people that are trying to steal our content. And then, of course, when we move things to the cloud, The pointer doesn't
You
work.
want to just say beep?
Yeah, I'll just say beep and we'll move on. So when we move to the cloud, we have all of our infrastructure. You don't own that unless you're paying for dedicated services. You don't own any of that. You're just spliced out into a tenant somewhere, and you're expected to trust that security. It's like, well, yeah, we'll look after your stuff for you. We would never read your stuff. We would never be like Edward Snowden, and no, I shouldn't say that, and take stuff. But you know what I mean? Like, the stuff goes in the cloud. So, but there's a gap between the black hat and the outside and your content that's stored. And that would be the perimeter edge, the firewall, the protection. But who's on the other side? He shouted out the users. But this guy, for you, if you move to 365, that's not really your users, because look where they are. That's your Microsoft operator. Now, we're going to call him Steve. Okay? Steve, the Microsoft operator. Do you trust Steve? He works in the Office 365 data center. Do you trust him? Has he read all those emails that you shouldn't have sent? Has he looked at all those pictures that you put in OneDrive because that's where you were told to put them, but they shouldn't really have gone there? You have no idea, do you? Is Steve a good guy? I don't know. Is Steve a good guy?
Well, I know Steve. Our kids are in the same soccer team. He's a fine guy.
Okay. Okay. We can go with that then. So Steve's a good guy. So that's it. We all trust. OneDrive's great. Steve's great. You'll be fine. That's not really how it goes, is it? Just because there's a Microsoft guy sitting there who can get to your stuff. Now, this could be, imagine that this wasn't 365 and this was something else that you went to. You still have the same issue. You have this other person that's supposed to look after your stuff for you and protect it for you, but how do you know that they're right? So how does Microsoft fix this? Well, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Microsoft went and built these massive data centers all over the place. So how do they restrict people coming in? Well, it's physical access, isn't it? You know what? You've seen those buildings where they've got the big concrete bollard things in front of it and you can't get cars through and everything else. It's that type of physical security. You can't get into the data centers. Let's see if anybody's with me on this. So I was talking about this last night. I run quite a lot. And every time I catch a plane, I always wonder if I could outrun the TSA guys. Have you ever thought that? You just sit there thinking, you'll never catch me. But when you do, it's really going to hurt. But I sit there and I think, I reckon I could. I'm kind of like, whew, I could run right through there, straight. Yeah. Never done it yet. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here quite clearly. But you know, it's that thing, isn't it? But they have perimeter access to stop you doing that. That's why the airports have the same thing. But they do background checks, there's biometrics, there's all kinds of different things to stop the Microsoft guy, Steve, actually getting into the building. Because why does he need to be there? Well, you've all seen the hacker movies, haven't you, where they go in and plug a USB stick in the servers and take the drives out? Because that happens all the time, obviously. But that's an issue. So perimeter security is put in place. Then they go to the network layer. Well, how are we going to block you from that? How are we going to block people coming in? Well, network access control list, block the traffic, port controls, firewalls, all those different things. And most importantly, auditing and monitoring. So let's do a show of hands. Who's genuinely spent time reading audit logs for fun? Nah, see, that was a trick question. You're like, no, I wouldn't do it for fun. But who's done that? Who actively monitors their SharePoint environment? Who actively reads log files of anything that you have in your infrastructure? There's a couple of people, their hands are like, yeah, I do a little bit. But we don't do it, do we? That's like number one rule of checking for something like this is auditing and monitoring. Then we go to something of access. So Steve, he needs to go and do something on the 365 environment. He needs to go and reboot the OneDrive servers. That's just funny, isn't it? Just think of that logic. Oh, something's wrong with OneDrive. Just reboot the servers. It'll be fine. Because that's what you tell your users, isn't it? I can't get to something. Just reboot. I'm just going to reboot the entire OneDrive platform in one go. But access is done very specifically. They don't just get to turn up and go, my name's Steve, just let me in. There's a whole process they have to go through, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the big thing is two-factor auth for this. It's not just him. Then we go to the application level. What kind of applications are we getting access to? What kind of authentication mechanisms do we need to use? So for Office 365, it's all federated claims-based authentication with very granular permissions to finally control how people get in and get in. So when Steve tries to get access, He doesn't just get blanket access to everything. He gets access to what he's supposed to have access to. And then, of course, the data itself, like it should be. Who's not using BitLocker? Okay, and that's actually pretty good. Because we should be using something like that on the disks to encrypt the data, to store it. So when we leave the laptop on the train one day, or we leave the USB sticks with all of our corporate data on it on a train somewhere, that it doesn't get stolen, no one can get to it. So these are things that Microsoft have done to make it secure from an infrastructure perspective. So looking at this, who trusts Steve now? Okay, we got like a couple of people. That's a bit of a bad show. Like, we have all this stuff in place, but you know what? Steve could still do something, couldn't he? He could go through all this process, and he could do it. So...
I don't trust Steve.
You don't trust Steve?
No.
But I thought your kids played soccer.
No, our kids are on the same soccer team. But
Okay.
still, when it comes to the data center, I don't trust him. So that's why I require that Steve go through background checks. Has to be thoroughly screened. He gets fingerprinted. You know, it's harder for Steve to get authorized to be in the Microsoft data center than it is for him to buy a handgun. I'm just saying. Now, from the account management side, of course, we've got very thorough controls over accounts. So as soon as somebody moves from one position to another, their accounts are disabled, and everybody has unique... Oh, that was weird. Everybody has unique accounts, so you don't have to worry about a bunch of operators using the same account to do their stuff. And, of course, there's a load of training that everybody has to go through. So that makes me trust Steve just a little bit more. Now, you're about to see an awesome animation. So you can wait till the end before you give me the ooh. But when you do, one of these is going to fly into the audience. No,
you can't
wait
do
till
the
the
ooze,
end.
yeah, not yet.
Who did that? Who did that? You're disqualified. Okay, so this guy wants to get to the server, but look what happened. It's not over yet. So this, as you notice, this giant lock fell on his attempt to access the server. So what does he have to do now? Now we have this facility called just-in-time access. So if this guy is going to make any changes at all, he has to provide a request with some reason. And the reason is generally something like, this customer is having an outage, or this customer is having a serious problem, or this customer has a question where I have to go in and look at their data to be able to help them. So what do we do then? Well, first, we go through the access eligibility checklist. So what do you have to do? You've got to make sure that the guy still works for us. You've got to make sure that he's gone through his background check. And this is a real background check. It actually takes weeks to complete. Is he fingerprinted? Has he gone through his security training within the last year? And does his manager approve of what he's about to do? If so, he's eligible. No. Who hasn't said anything yet? Okay, just hold your water. So then we go through a role check to make sure that this person is actually, right now, identified as somebody who has access to these resources. So sometimes, for instance, we have engineers who are actually in the product group. They go through weekly rotations of being what we call the on-call engineer, which means they're the guys who get called in the middle of the night. Those guys can't get access unless they're actually on call. So let's say this guy was on call. Thank you. Then he's got an allowed role. So what's left? We need to make sure that everything is logged. So at that point, His temporary access is granted. Oh, there's one more step. I knew I was going to catch you guys. So this is only temporary. But what will happen soon is... Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, good job. What? Okay.
Wow.
Let me clarify. Steve could be Jewish, but that's actually Steve's hair. I know because I put it on myself. I knew what my intent was. It's not a yarmulke. All right. So that's how we take care of Steve. But what about the other kinds of breaches that can occur? What do you think? Should we assume that there's no breach?
Well, that's what's been going on for years, isn't it? No one's ever really worried until they figure out that something's happened. We're always in this we wait till something happens and then we try to prevent it from ever happening again. But that's not worked. Anybody think of any of the biggest hacks that took place just this year? There's a whole bunch of them. I mean, they're all... And some of those have been going on for years. When they do the actual audits and come back, these people have been sitting in the environments for months at a time, just waiting for something to do, waiting to find that information. So we have what's called... It's working again. We have what's called assume breach methodology. This is the idea that you just assume that your stuff's being broken into all the time. And then you proactively look for that. But you have to understand the adversary, the person that's coming in. So we were talking earlier today, and I said what I often say to people is your content valuable to you? And you're like, well, no, not really. Because if you're like me, I get tons of email, I write tons of documents, and then I archive them off and then never look at them again. But I have gigabytes, terabytes of this data that I don't want anyone to have because it's mine. I own that. But does it really matter if somebody took it? So I often ask the question, what's your content worth to you? What's your content worth to your organization? And if it's valuable to the organization, is it valuable to somebody else? Does it have something that would be of benefit to them? So understanding your adversary that's coming in, understanding that there's data breaches that take place, understanding that you need to monitor that and do something, and understanding everything that you've got in your environment. No, we broke again.
No.
Okay. Now, what does 365 do? 365 does what's called continuous validation. Continuous validation, if you guys had all the money that Microsoft had to look after their cloud, you could do this too. Or you could just hire a guy to do this. Maybe he'd be a Jewish guy, I don't know. But you could hire a guy to do this. And what would he do? He would sit there and try and break and break and break and break and break, just banging on the door until he can find an entry point in. They do this for 365. They have what's called the red team, blue team. Red team's the bad guys, blue team's the good guys. Red team guys try to break in, blue team tries to protect. They do this constantly. In the Azure platform, they have the same thing, red team, blue team. Sit there, that's their job. Can you imagine having that job? How cool would that be? So what did you do today? I tried to break into Office 365. Every day. That's all I do. Try to find vulnerabilities. Try to act like an internal user. Try to act like an external user and find something. But most importantly, you have to understand that there's always something left behind. There's a trace that allows you to find all those ones that have been done so far in the past year or 18 months, those hack attempts. They've all been found out because there's something left behind. And that's part...
Liam,
yes?
Liam, I know that everybody wants to know about Locard's exchange principle. You guys have been waiting for this, right?
And everyone's thinking, I don't know, what is he even talking about? And I don't really care, but thanks for that. That's great.
Sure.
But no, it's an interesting point, though, because it really is. That is all about the trace that gets left behind, because there's always a trace that needs to be done. But you won't find it unless you go through and do activities such as penetration testing or trying to break in yourselves or audit logs or monitoring. So, how does this process work? We have the bad guys, represented by the skull and crossbones, because they're pirate hackers. So they're going to sit there and they're going to bang on this firewall again and again and again and again and again, trying to break into the system. Those guys will be the red team. On the inside is the blue team. They're all effectively the same people. They all have the same set of skills. They all know how to hack and break into things, but they're also looking for ways of fixing. But then what also Office 365 does is while they're trying to break in from this side, and again, they also try to break in on this side. Now, why would that be important? They're trying to break in with valid 365 credentials, internal Microsoft credentials. Because, like we got told earlier, the biggest threat is who? The users. Because the odds of the red team on the outside breaking in is fairly slim. You put a good firewall in front of it, and you put some monitoring in place, and you have something that inspects the traffic, the odds of somebody getting in is fairly slim. But on the inside, I often tell people, we inherently trust our users. And people often say, no, they don't, but you do, because you're an employee. You're an employee, I'm an employee, we trust you, because we work with you. Why would you do something bad? But that's what happens. The two biggest breaches that took, well, actually quite a few of them. If you take Target, for example, you will know about the Target one. Target one was done because of a third-party vendor set of credentials that was classed as internal creds that got compromised and the hackers came in. That's how that works. So we have to understand that for 365, OneDrive, Windows, Azure, these are doing it 24 hours a day. So you can be assured that it's actually nice and secure.
So I just want to make a comment about this, because this isn't Steve, but these are guys named Matt and Chang, and there's Travis in there too. And they have a really healthy sense of competition among them. It's a very interesting thing to see. They're not actually the same guys, but there is a red team at Microsoft whose job it is, full-time, to try and penetrate the system. And what we found is that as time goes on, they aren't able actually to penetrate from, let's see, what is it?
The outside.
Your left.
Yes.
But they've had some success penetrating from the top, but as all the gaps are closed, they have to do more and more arcane things. It's very interesting to see. But we're very proud of the way these guys are in constant competition with one another. But let's say you are a hacker and you decide that you want to try and intercept packets. Well, we do encryption in transit, as you can see by this handy lock icon. So from client to server, we use the latest ciphers. We support perfect forward secrecy now and 48-bit keys. And there's the evidence. We get an A from SSL Labs. Now, if you were to, do you guys care about SSL Labs? Anybody care about, okay, that's good, that's good. So let me just tell you, if you try this on your own tenant today, just depending on which farm you're on, we're in the process of rolling this out now, depending on what farm you're on, you may see a B, and that's because we have some old ciphers that we're removing on a farm-by-farm basis. But we're not susceptible to the SSL 3.0 problem. Everything's looking hunky-dory. And it's still hunky-dory even with our communication along leased lines. When we're moving from data center to data center, we still use SMB 3.0 encryption for that. And when we do backups to the cloud, we also use AES 256 encryption when that stuff goes to Azure. But what, you might ask, about encryption at rest? You should get a T-shirt ready for this one.
Okay.
Have you seen this one before?
Prepare to be wowed.
Prepare to be wowed. So, each file is uniquely encrypted. So what we do is we encrypt each file, and on those files, we have, each one has a separate key. And if you have a big file, we'll actually break it into chunks, and each chunk gets its own key. And later on, when you change the file, not yet. And when you change the file, each of the deltas is encrypted with its own key. So, imagine that you've got these vaults. These actually represent Azure storage accounts. So that's where we're going to end up putting this data. But first, it's important to recognize that we have a very carefully monitored key store. That's what the monitor guy represents there. And what we put in that key store is the credentials to each of these storage accounts. So this is a highly secure store that we have. And then we randomly distribute all of these chunks that have already been encrypted into these storage accounts. Then what happens? Well, we take this key and we take all the individual keys, and then we encrypt them. So now you've got this this batch of ones and zeros, and we slap them into the content database. So what that means is that if somebody attacks the content database, here's what they get. Content database, now all it has is a map to the chunks that are stored in the Azure storage containers. So all it will be able to get is access, is a map essentially, and then a bunch of bits that represent keys that he can't decrypt. Now what if he pulls Tom Cruise here and tries to attack the safes? Well, if he does that, he could break into a safe, but what do you have? You just got a bunch of random bits, and not only are they random, but the distribution of the chunks is random. So you can't even figure out how to put a document together even if you could encrypt it. And finally, the most secure asset in the data center is the key store. But if you could get to it, you've got a key. So what happens next? You've got all these keys. There you go. They're sitting there in the key store, but they can't be permanent, so we have to rotate them. And finally, just so you know, we use BitLocker on all the disks. So it's encryption upon encryption upon. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And this is. So I'll just wait a minute while you all. No, I won't. So what this is. Somebody mentioned the government earlier as a security concern. Well, the issue that most people have is with the notion of a blind subpoena, where the government comes to us and says, we want that customer's data. This is what people are worried about. We want that customer's data, and you're under a gag order, so you can't tell the customer that we want your data. That's what everybody's worried about. That's why customer-held keys are thought to be so valuable. But and we'll talk about what's coming in the future, a little ways in the future. But if you read the highlighted bit, what you will glean is that from a legal perspective, we think we have a solid case for rejecting all of the government attempts to get access to this data without informing the customer. I mean, if the government came to you in your company, you'd be obliged to provide their data. And since you own the data, the government should have to go to you, even if we're the stewards of the data. And so far, we have never lost a case, and we don't see any reason that we would. So I just want to give you that sort of warm, fuzzy feeling that your data is safe in the cloud, even from the NSA. So we talked about all of these intruders trying to penetrate the system. And you should feel pretty good now that we're putting a lot of effort into keeping those guys out, and we're being very successful. But earlier, I can't believe the first thing you said was our users. Your beloved users. Come on. They're not bad guys, are they? Man, I'm glad I don't work at your company.
So this is you.
So there are a couple of different kinds of users. And one kind of user is the administrator. So it turns out that the way it's been in O365 is that if you want to give somebody access to be a SharePoint administrator, you have to give them global admin rights. So let's say I'm this guy who's actually a legitimate company administrator. He's one of the few who holds the keys to the kingdom. He's the master of his domain. He is omnipotent. Well, he could take a look and say, you know, life is, oh, thanks. Life is good up here on Cloud 8, but, yeah, this is me, Prometheus Jones. But here's this guy, Alex Darrow. His real job is to be a SharePoint administrator. He doesn't really have anything to do with mailboxes. In fact, I want to keep him out of the mailboxes. I don't want him to do anything with the Exchange servers at all. All he does is deal with user profiles, permissioning issues on site collections, and that kind of stuff. What is he doing as a full-fledged, company-wide global administrator? It offends my sensibilities as a true global administrator. So, and just to show you that how true that is, look at this. This guy, Alex, has all of the same menu entries, including access to all the admin features. So, we're introducing a feature that helps to allay Prometheus's concerns. So I'm signing out as Alex. I'll sign back in a minute. But now, as the global administrator, what I'm about to do is change Alex's admin role. So it used to be no admin access and company administrator. Now you could provide a limited admin role and say, dude, you can only do SharePoint administration from henceforth, even forever.
You should go. I think you should bow. Just bow at the front.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
So let's. Oh, that took a lot out of me. Let's take a look now. I'm going to log back in as Alex.
Say nothing.
It's actually available now as a PowerShell command. The UI is coming very shortly, but we haven't actually given a date yet. Should be out. I would be very surprised. I would be very surprised if it weren't out by the end of this quarter. What's that?
Yes. We'll bring him in later. You can ask him. He knows more about this than we do.
Yeah.
It's always one of those things when you type in passwords, you get nervous.
Actually, just typing in tenant names is making me nervous.
So you couldn't even spell Microsoft then.
All right. Now let's take a look at the difference. As you can see, the screen on your right shows that Alex's access has been pretty much eviscerated. So now he's just the SharePoint guy, which is great for Alex because he doesn't have to worry about inadvertently screwing anything up. So I had to show you the end of it. You already applauded. I should have just gotten out then, I guess. Give me a little bit. Just give me a little bit now. Thanks. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. I don't have to beg for it. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so that means that you can control your administrators. Who's a SharePoint admin now? Oh, quite a few of you. Who's, well, obviously not a SharePoint admin. A consultant, an end user, whatever it is. Do you trust your SharePoint admins? No. No. That was a very definitive no. But now you can control them and kind of ring fence them into doing stuff. But of course, we all agreed that we don't trust the end users either. How many instances have you had where end users have sent stuff out that they shouldn't have sent? Or stored stuff in, Dropbox or something else just to avoid going through the stuff at work? It happens all the time. I speak to clients constantly where they're end users, and it's not that they're trying to break anything. They just are trying to do their job, but they just try to circumvent everything. So one of the things that Microsoft put in place was the whole idea of rights management. And rights management obviously came in quite a while ago, but it's growing and growing and growing. And this is really straightforward for you to implement. And the good news is, it's not just for SharePoint Online either. So you can provision it very simply. This little screen right here, that's what you have to do. It's really straightforward. You go into your tenant, go into SharePoint, do settings, and click IRM and enable it. And then it's done. At that point, you're able to utilize that mechanism. But what is IRM? IRM is individual file encryption. It writes information into the headers of the file. So when it tries to be transported around, that it needs to call home ever so often, and it locks out certain permissions. So you can protect Office and PDF formats using this mechanism. But for your end users, documents are protected at the time they download them, and then rights are given accordingly at that point. So what you can do as an administrator is you can go to the document libraries, assign policies to those the end user doesn't know, and when they put documents in, you can then have certain features that are being switched off or enabled depending what you want to do. And users can still edit the documents like they would normally, and they'll just be presented with certain things. And of course, what's great about this is you can also enable the IRM documents inside OneDrive too. So if you have this enabled, because remember that you can apply an IRM policy either at the point of creation inside the Office application, or you can do it as a policy on a document library and have it applied to a file after the point of uploading. On top of that, Microsoft introduced data loss protection policies. The idea of making sure that your end users are warned that they're looking at stuff that they shouldn't be looking at, or they shouldn't send it out, or whatever else it would be. So in our SharePoint environment, we created two policies, one called Aussies and credit cards, and one called Canada financial data. Now, when you create those, we can actually go in and selectively choose how you want those to be applied. So it doesn't have to be SharePoint Online. You can just do OneDrive for Business, because we've found that lots of customers don't necessarily do both straight away. Sometimes it's just SharePoint Online. Other times it's just OneDrive for Business. But you can do both. You can do selective sites or lists to make that work. But you can apply that to that. The rules itself, you can customize and create rules as you go through. So, for example, we have one called sensitive data. If we've clicked into that rule, then we're able to add what denotes sensitive data. What is that sensitive information? So we're going to choose credit cards, because obviously that would be important. You wouldn't want people emailing credit card details out of your organization or storing them. But you know what? I've done this a few times with clients, and we go in and we can do a search in SharePoint, and we find credit card numbers. It's really bizarre. Or lots of other information that shouldn't really be in SharePoint either. You can go in and specify the number of the count. You can go in and say, I want it to be a minimum this, a minimum that, a percentage accuracy. You can set that to your heart's content. So you can either be super strict with it or kind of a bit wishy-washy. Depends what you want to do. Then, of course, what's great is because no one ever reads the logs. We already agreed that we can send notifications now. We can send notifications to specific individuals. We can go through and say, do it for email content, use policy tips also, make sure the owner gets an email to notify you that something is happening. So we're trying to be a bit more proactive now to say, hey, there's some content that's met this rule that needs to be taken care of. Then we can obviously report everything, and we can send email incidents. And these are always good fun to play with, because you put these in place, and then you'll get an email of an incident. Then you can call the end user up and tell them off. And that's great. It's like telling your own kids off. Like, what is wrong with you? Stop sending that stuff out. Because you need to educate the users. Because if it was left down to me, I would just store stuff wherever I wanted. And I do. You know, I'm like the worst user ever. Because I will always find something else that's more shiny that I want to use. And then, of course, to make it nice and easy for the end user, you can present them with a message that says, hey, stop being stupid, you can't send that. Or something nicer, because people tend to get offended by that. But something that says, hey, this is an issue. And of course, we have reports and auditing. We can go through and look at nice little charts that tell you what the severity was, drill into things that have left the business, insights, export it to Excel. All this information that you have that you can now present to your boss and say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you on the phone?
I got to take this.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
It's this sales guy.
Okay.
He needs to look at the customer list.
And you're going to send that to him?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're talking right now, right? You don't care.
Okay.
Do you?
This is a bit weird.
Yeah, I can show you what I'm going to do.
You've got to make sure you're not. Okay, go on then. What's the list?
All right. Well, here's the deal. He has.
Sorry, we'll come back to you in a second.
Yeah. Talk among yourselves for a moment. So, we've got these customers who. Whoops. We've got those customers, but we've got some other ones too. Yeah, check this out. We have these customers, and he knows that these. Oh, pardon me. We'll set this up again in just a second.
With the best rehearsing ever.
So he knows that one of his customers is afraid of rabbits, but he can't remember which one.
Okay.
He's taken some notes, and you can see, oh, it's 8 Chen. Doesn't like rabbits. But he just wants me to send him the whole list. So I'm just going to get ready to...
But it's got like a thing on it.
Oh, what's that? The content may consent. Go to the file menu for more details. It says there are credit card numbers. I don't see any credit card numbers on here.
Well, if you scroll across, there might be some more.
Oh, crap.
See,
I mean... Heaven forfend, there are credit card numbers here.
And social security numbers.
And social security numbers. Well, how come it just says credit card number here?
We'll check the policy and see what the rules are.
All right. Luckily, I happen to be an administrator, so I can go in and check these policies.
So you're the greatest example of this.
Yes, I am. Aussies and credit cards, sensitive data, but just a little. Credit card number. There's nothing about social security number there. I guess I could
Add a rule.
add something.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that maybe I've taken up enough time here. I'll do this later. I'll finish this later. So, that's it for DLP. Oh, God, that didn't go well. I'm sorry, you guys.
The walk of shame.
Yeah. Scene.
But the interesting thing about it is you saw how easy it was. And actually, when we tried to work through this process of how to do it, that's really what happens, isn't it? Someone just calls you and says, send me the stuff, and you just send it. You don't ever think about it. Why would you think about it? It's just a guy in the office asking you for some stuff, you send it. But now we're trying to present messages to the end user to say, you might want to not do this. You might want to wait. You're sending stuff that you shouldn't do. But of course, then we noticed that there was a glitch, because even if it had cleaned out the credit card numbers, then he was sending social security numbers. So there's an element of you as the administrator needs to understand how this works. And really, you should be doing this now on premises and everything else. It should be that easy to do stuff. Yeah, so there's a core set of templates that exist in the system, and then you can go through and create your own at that point. So there's, I'm trying to think of the number of templates there are in the DLP. They're adding more constantly to that list for each country, each region, so you can add those in. And then you can customize them after that. So one thing that we also have is, well, what about all the stuff that goes into OneDrive or goes into SharePoint or goes into Exchange or other stuff coming in the future like Link or whatever else? How do you check this stuff afterwards? Because if it's not being sent anywhere, but it's all being shoved into those places, how do you know? Well, that's where we can use what's called sensitive search, which is part of the e-discovery process of 365. You have some of this on premises too, but in 365 it's a little bit more kind of mature than it would be on premises. But the idea is that you can look for sensitive data. So if you look at the syntax that we're using, we're actually specifying sensitive type and then saying look for credit card numbers and also look for social security numbers. And there's lots of syntax that we can use to find that information. Once we've found it, we can identify that list, export that list, and then you can go wandering around the office and start slapping people to get rid of the stuff. I mean, who would not want to do that? But you can do that. You can also extend this into OneDrive. Because remember, OneDrive is mine, isn't it? So when we configure OneDrive for business, it's associated to me as the user. That's my personal OneDrive. That almost sounded like it was dying. But like, OneDrive is mine. Now, of course, you as the administrator can go and add yourself to that one, and other people will need access to that. But what a great thing. You can preview the results. You can export them out. You click that.
Oh.
But once you've done that, and you've figured all the data, and you've cleaned it all out, then you don't want to keep everything there forever, do you? That tends to be a bit of a thing that we've seen, is people just dump everything in and then just leave it and expect it to go. But no, we can do document deletion policies instead. We can go through and say, hey, I want to add some content. I would like to say recycle it long time, specify to permanently delete it. So it's kind of like the archive mechanism that you would use for records management, but this one is all about deletion. And you can go through and say, delete this content. Because once it goes in the cloud, you're probably not going to spend all the time in that service looking at all the content to figure out what should be deleted, what shouldn't be deleted. So we can run deletion policies, assign it to everything, and then have the stuff automatically clean itself out. In the deletion policies, we can do multiple policies. So if you've ever used the retention policy piece, it's kind of like that. You can do multiple deletion policies based on the type of content that you configure it for. The site owners get to choose the policy that's associated to it. You can enforce mandatory policies, which is I'm always a great believer in. I'm a great believer of just minimizing the risk and telling people that's how it is. That when the stuff goes in, it goes in like that, and then it gets deleted in 5 years, and that's it. Because then the control is removed. The thought and question of should I do something or not do something is removed. It's much easier to handle. It extends over to OneDrive for business sites. That's a good thing, because OneDrive for business tends to grow organically. If you have an organization of 1,000 people and you issue OneDrive for business sites for all of them, trust me, it'll get filled with stuff. And I didn't use the word work, I just said stuff, because I'll just use it as my dumping ground in the cloud. And then what I'm going to do is go home, and at some point I'm going to sync it to 1 million devices, because I don't want to keep booting up my work laptop. I'll sync it to my home machine, I'll sync it to my iPhone, I'll sync it to my Surface tablet, because I just want to, then you... Wait there, think of that logic for a second. I've got it all over the place. It's in the cloud, but I'm syncing it everywhere, and I have access to it. And we can enforce a policy on all site collections. So think of that story for a second. I mean, who's got Windows phones? iPhones? Android phones? Something I don't care about? It's a couple. But yes, we have these phones. And who actually uses OneDrive? Nice. That kind of made sense, seeing as it was a OneDrive session you were going to. But yes, but some of you use OneDrive. How many of you sync it between multiple places? There you go. Why would you do that? Convenience. That's what I was looking for. Convenience. There's no actual logic of why you need to synchronize it in 50 different places. It's convenience. If I wanted to be secure, it would be synced in one place. The place that I can use to get access with. And it would be my corporate machine or corporate device that I'm allocated. Now just think about that. How are you going to control the devices? Because I've got my phone, I synchronize all the corporate data from OneDrive for Business to my phone, and then I leave my phone on the train. And I can now, well, whoever picks up the phone has access to all of my stuff. So how does that work? Do we have anything?
Well, in fact, we have mobile device management. Now, how many people have been to a mobile device management talk during this conference? How many people are interested in mobile device management? Well, that's interesting, because I wasn't actually going to talk much to this, but I will. So mobile device management has these 4 components you see here. The first 3 are actually part of O365. They're all powered by Intune, and you can get the application management that's completely controlled by Intune. So conditional access is about being able to gain access to the device depending on the device participation in the AD. So you could say, for instance, that a device is managed or not, that it's compliant or not, based on signals we get from the device describing what kinds of software is on it. So if you're running a non-compliant version of OneDrive for Business, for instance, your company could specify that you need to get OneDrive for Business from the App Store in the company so that you can so that it could be properly controlled. Then your device would be out of compliance and you wouldn't be able to log into the device. Device management has to do with being able to set up policies like an encryption, like encryption and setting up a PIN and that sort of stuff. So that we're offering on Apple and Android devices right now, and we'll be introducing a Windows Phone shortly. And then selective wipe and reporting. Reporting gives you a mechanism by which you can identify who's doing what on all these devices. So it's the kind of auditing you'd expect. Selective wipe means that you've got a personal device, so it's a bring your own device kind of situation. So I've got my phone, and I want to be able to run OWA on it from my company. This will allow, if I were to leave the company or create some kind of heinous act or something, where the company didn't want me to have access anymore, they could actually wipe that data from my computer from my phone remotely. Then finally, the application management bit is a little finer grain control, and that's where you could say, I want to be able to take data out of my an email in OWA and paste it into a Word document. Maybe take something from a Word document, paste it into PowerPoint. But you can only do that if all of the apps are properly managed. So if you try to paste something into an app that is improperly managed, what you'll find is that you just can't do it. So cut and paste doesn't work in those kinds of situations. So that's what MDM is all about, and I encourage you, if you're interested in MDM, catch up with one of the video sessions. I think those sessions are all past now, but they give some great demos. They go through the whole process very thoroughly. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was this little piece of device management called conditional access, and a little piece of that is sync control for OneDrive for Business, which is a capability that's currently being rolled out. So here's the story. Let's say that you are in a company, and what you're interested in doing, and it turns out there are a lot of companies interested in this, what you're interested in doing is making sure that people can't sync to a machine they don't know about. And the way you distinguish a machine they know about from a machine they don't know about, that you don't know about, is based on the domain to which the machine is joined. So what these folks want to be able to do is say, if my machine is joined to the corporate domain, I want to allow sync. If it's not, if I'm at an internet kiosk or something like that, no dice. I don't want to allow you to sync your data and leave it there for somebody else to come take a peek at. So we've introduced this new capability, and I know you guys are going to love this name. It's Set SPO Sync Client Set SPO Tenant Sync Client Restriction, and that domain GUID right there, that is it's an actual GUID, but it's not a real domain GUID. So you can copy it down if you want. So let's go ahead and run this command. It's done. What do you guys think of that, huh? And then we'll do a get, see what we got. Oh, the restriction has been enabled, and the allowed domain list is that domain. So what does that mean? Well, let's say you've already used Steve. Let's say I'm Fred. I'm Fred from Contoso. I just made that name up, Contoso. I'm Fred from Contoso, and what I want to do is a little bit of syncing. Then shortly that will come up, and that's... Whoops. That's not Fred. This is Fred. As you could tell from this, Fred is a fun guy. Yeah, sorry. So we go to sync. We're ready to sync. And, oh no, the library's not available offline. Why would that be? Because this machine is not a domain joined machine. If instead we, oh no, that was it. Sorry. So that should give you great confidence that you can't sync to a non-domain joined machine. So let me illustrate how that works. We did that part?
Yep. There we go.
Okay. Get ready with one of these. So here's how it works. You have your machine. If the GUIDs match the domain whitelist, which means that your machine is domain joined, we go ahead and allow the sync. What if it doesn't match the domain whitelist? Well then, no soup for you.
Let's see who can catch.
Yeah, that was not bad, actually.
That was a really good throw, and then it just dropped right there. Thank you. I do try.
Okay, and there's a little bit of stuff that's coming down the pike. hot off the press, it was announced at RSA, that you may or may not have heard about. So here's the first one. Customer lockbox. You may recognize the guy with the yarmulke. And here's what happens. Okay, saying just-in-time access, logged. But now, look who's involved. This is Fritz from Contoso Corporation. He is responsible for making a judgment about whether Microsoft can access his corporate data. Let's say he says yes. So now it's customer approved. What that does, it puts the customer in control of whether Microsoft has access or not. This is being developed as a standard mechanism that would be very difficult to overcome. So once we put this in place, we'll be able to block the blind subpoena attempts that the government might make. So let's go ahead and finish this up. And you just get temporary access yet again. We'll have to reapply to the customer if you want to extend. So no access without customer approval. But what about customer held keys? Everybody wants customer held keys. Do you guys know what I'm talking about, customer held keys, as customers? Everybody knows? Okay. Well, let me explain it anyway, because some people didn't raise their hands. So customer held key means that the customer provides the key, and that key is used to encrypt our key. So what that means is the key that is used to encrypt all of the different document parts that get stored up in the storage containers, they're actually encrypted by a key that the customer provides. And let's keep going with this. So if the customer leaves, what that means is we no longer have access to any of that data. So it takes care of the leaving scenario. And if we did try to get to the data, we would be very sad and quizzical. Then there are a couple of additional things that are coming. More detailed audit logs. So now you'll be able to see, you'll be able to audit read activity, and you'll be able to audit more in-depth operator activity. This stuff is due to be in customer preview in third quarter. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but customer lockbox for OneDrive and SharePoint Online, that is on the roadmap for first quarter 2016, and the bring your own key stuff is slated for later in 2016. The detailed audit logs will be available for preview in third quarter. And then we have one other feature that is on the roadmap without a timeline. And we're working hard on this, but this is conditional access for the browser. What that does is says, oh, okay, well, you can't sync to anything but a managed machine. This will allow you to say, oh, and you can't get browser access to O365 resources unless you're operating from a managed and compliant machine. So that's all coming down the road.
So, where did we start and where did we end? So we started with threats from without, and we realized that maybe Steve, who's the Microsoft guy, could be a threat. But really, the pieces that are in place, the no standing access, the intrusion detection, the encryption, all those pieces together, protect from the outside, protect the black hats coming in. And then from the inside, restricting administrators, restricting Steve from coming in, restricting your local admins, bundling your users and saying, hey, this is what you can use, everything else is restricted. You have to use IRM or you have to use data loss protection. We can block you syncing to all those devices. So all of you that have synchronized to multiple devices, maybe you should not do that. Maybe implement that feature and then control yourself and use the devices that are supposed to be used for that. And then, of course, to make it easier, because no one likes looking at audit logs, audits and reports, sending alerts to you, notifications that things have not met the criteria. Because remember that the whole idea, if you think of the logic of the red team, blue team mentality, and this assume breach, is that it's proactive. That you're proactively attacking, you're proactively protecting, and you're proactively being notified that things are happening. So now we can be proactively notified of something that is, got credit card numbers in, or social security numbers, or other information that's private to your organization that shouldn't be sent anywhere. And when we utilize IRM, you can stop people copying stuff out of the emails and forwarding them onto other people, or copying stuff out of SharePoint documents and pasting them somewhere else. And then with the mobile device management, we can do the mobile devices and protect and ring-fence everything. Now, you might think, like I do sometimes, that you're taking all the fun away, because we're like blocking everything down now so you can only do what you're supposed to do. But you know what? I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with having less choices but having stuff that worked. Because isn't that the case? That we have, the reason why our end users use other products and other platforms is because the stuff that we want them to use doesn't work the way they want them to use it. The adoption doesn't work. And the work that's being done on 365 and Azure and OneDrive is moving leaps ahead to make it so it's the choice that it should be. So all the things we've talked about for me and the things coming in the future mean that OneDrive for me would stand as the secure place to store my files, because I know that it's protected and that with the new features coming, I can completely own everything. I just don't own the servers. I don't have to worry about that, but I can protect and own everything as if it was an on-premises. So for me, it's a good choice.
So, I would say thank you for coming right now, but then you'd all get up, so I'll save that for just a second. I would like for you to consider going to the next breakout in this room, 3135. We didn't talk about security for external collaboration. My colleague Sarath Subramaniam will be talking about that in great depth in just a few minutes. And then this guy is going to be giving a full talk on his own. I'm
allowed to speak on my own.
I'm letting him leave the nest. He's going to be giving a full talk on his own tomorrow. So please consider those. Then when you get a look at this slide deck, we have some resources here, and in particular, you will probably be interested in these RSA announcement blogs. This is some additional stuff. But then the important part is this evaluation. So please complete your evaluations and let us know how you think we did.
Say it.
What's that?
Say it. They're all waiting.
Thank you all for coming.